Good morning, everybody. Can I ask you to take your seats? Must well-timed. The Planning Commission is in the room. We can start. Thank you. Are we good? Are we good online, Moses? Thank you. My name is Isobel Frye, and I'm the Executive Director of the Social Policy Initiative. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this room and also virtually online. I'm just going to have a short introduction before we move to our opening address. And I'll just mention a slight variation on that. So the Social Policy Initiative, we changed in 2020 from the Studies in Poverty and Inequality Institute, which was started in 2006. Our main aim and drive and vision has always been the reduction of poverty and inequality and the promotion of socioeconomic rights in South Africa. In 2020, we realized that the extent of the challenge was deeper and our resources were smaller, and so we chose to focus in on social security, which is something that we had been increasingly focusing on actually in our practice of work, particularly at NEDLAC. Social security is something which we have always seen as being far greater than poor or charity relief, but it is at heart an economic policy. Today, what we are seeking to do is to expand that knowledge, but also to hear from participants their views in order to promote a deeper and more robust discussion. The way that we work at SPI is both through research and through advocacy. And at SPI, we have fought consistently to ensure the acknowledgement and expansion of social security as the pulse of a dynamic, prosperous, and above all, just and equal South Africa. Our visions have been impressed upon by giants such as Dr. Zola Skweyiya, Dr. Vivian Taylor, and of course, Professor Thandika Mkwandirira. I would like to just reference a quote, which I thought was really fitting, which has inspired me in terms of trying to advance the connection between the economic and the social. And going back to Franklin Roosevelt, in fact, he was talking about the first social security law. And he says, and I quote, "This law represents a cornerstone in a structure which is being built but is by no means completed. A structure intended to lessen the force of possible future depressions, to act as a protection to future administrations of the government against the necessity of going deeply into debt to furnish relief to the needy. A law to flatten out the peaks and valleys of deflation and of inflation. In other words, a law that will take care of human needs and at the same time provide for the United States an economic structure of vastly greater soundness." And that really, for us this year, is the take-home message, is that through the policies of social security, what we seek to do is to ensure that we don't face as many crises in our society, that the soundness of the foundation is permanent. And as needs and demands arise in the changing world of work, as well as other global crises, we are able to meet it from a foundation that already exists. So as SPI, we see the challenge of social security in South Africa as presenting a petri dish for all developing countries. No small claim there, but we've always had quite great and grand ambitions. For us, the idea of scholarship of social security and welfare ancestors, as I call them, such as Richard Titmuss at the London School of Economics and Esping Anderson's 3 models of welfare, have globally been seized upon in terms of people trying to do what we're trying to do, which is to fit an architecture to a new reality. And I just think of the work of Professor Erdem Yorick in Turkey, who has been looking at emerging markets and trying to build a new model of welfare, a new regime of welfare that applies and is appropriate to the needs of emerging markets. So just briefly, in the work that we've done at SPI on social security, about 10 years ago, we developed a measuring methodology for socioeconomic rights, because the question of progressive realization and how you measure progressive realization is a critical one. So with the help of Ford Foundation, We developed a 3-stage monitoring and measurement tool which looks at quality, access, and adequacy. At SPI, we've also published 3 crucial papers recently on the universal basic income. The first was charting universal basic income through pilots, and the second is modeling a decent and universal UBI at the upper bound poverty line without increasing taxation. And thirdly, linking this thinking with employment and public employment generation, which is work that Duma Krabule did for us, and I know that he did that in tandem with Youth Capital, who I see, and Youth Lab, who are in the room. We believe at SPI that currently we stand at the threshold of history, at the end of the COVID-19 moment, in which South Africa introduced a COVID grant for unemployed people and kept UBI on the table, which is work that we've done as SPI through many years at NEDLAC. And now this year we've been testing the links between universal basic income and just transitions. We've also sought to expand knowledge about appropriate social security in informal contexts for women. And next year we hope to look at the multiplier of state spend for every rand spent through social cash transfers. In terms of the length and breadth of social security policy and the extent to which it is often underlooked in this country, I think for me, I was trying to think of main ancillary policies that link into social security. And for me, they come up as economic and welfare models, the question of unemployment benefits, the question of active labour market policies, how we get people into work. Of course, social safety nets, being able to predict labour market flexibility within the paradigm of social security and social insurance. Questions of administrative efficiency, because we know in South Africa that's one of the matters that we have to deal with. Poverty and inequality are central to the question of social security. Cultural and demographic factors. What is our society going to be looking like in 5, 10, 15 years' time? Will we have a demographic bulge? Will we have more young people still? Who will pay for the older people? We're the opposite of many of the European countries. And how do we take that in as we look at appropriate policies? Of course, political and public opinion. What do people think about social security and why do they think about it? What are the factors that shape the social cohesion, which social security can act to as a centrifier and unifier of? What are the long-term outcomes? We know that people are worried about dependency. Is it better to have a country where people have income or where people have no income? What is our nation going to look like in 5, 10, 15 years' time? And that is dependent on the shape of the policies that are made and implemented today. International comparisons, do they help, do they not help? Is it still appropriate to look at the Nordic model? Can we look at, as I referred to, developing countries like Turkey, what are they learning there? The legal and regulatory framework, what does the Constitution say? Is it still appropriate to go back to the Grootboom idea of progressive realization? How does that fit into current policy making? And looking at both the private and the public sector involvement. In South Africa, for social insurance, we know that the private sector plays a significant role. How do we ensure that they're involved in conversations in a way that advance public good? And finally, the question increasingly of data availability, reliability, and privacy. If we want to have information about people so that they're on the social register, how much information is appropriate? How little information? And how do we do that in a way that protects dignity in a country where we don't want to ensure that people who are part of the administrative system feel that they have nothing left? And so, as you can see, I'm really looking forward to the next 2 days, and I hope that there are answers to some of these questions being posed. Thank you to all of you who have agreed to participate and to expand knowledge. And I'm also very, very pleased that we'll be able to screen the 350 Rand movie that was supported by UNICEF, and that looks at the lives of beneficiaries as well as talking heads who give their opinion. The Decent Path, the title comes from starting with a 350 grant and moving, as we see that the movie demonstrates, towards a universal decent basic income grant. I would like to thank UNICEF. I'd like to thank FES deeply for being such loyal supporters of our work on social security. I'd like to thank the Department of Social Development, SPI staff who pulled together a team of 4 who became an army of 4,000. Thank you very much. And maybe we'll consider whether Monday could be a public holiday. Unlike the president, maybe I deliver closer to the time. And the SPY board and our funders, Church of Sweden, who support us in many ways, academics and allies. I'd like to also express sincere regrets of the Minister of Social Development for not being able to be here, as well as the President, who initially was keen to be here, but had many conflicting calls on his time. I would like to welcome people who are online, and I'm welcoming and recognizing Dr. Wanga Zemba, who is one of our trustees. Also, Professor Jimmy Adesina, it's lovely to see you. Thank you for joining our process. And sorry to do this, but I also would, the many guests who are here, thank you for coming here, and also to recognize Cedric Anthony Christian, who is the economic attaché of the Embassy of the Republic of Congo, as well as Ms. Bok from the Embassy of Finland. So thank you. There are many words. 2 more things. Wi-Fi. I'm sure none of you are on your devices. You're all listening with rapt attention to what's happening here. But if you do need to, the Wi-Fi is Marriott Conference is the username, and apparently it doesn't need a password. Moses, the person taking photographs, is the person if you need to still share your presentation, have any technical queries. And Noma, would you like to stand? Is our senior researcher. If you do have any queries as well, you could ask her, as well as Ndi, who is somewhere. Is he online? Great. Antoine Sengfen, who is our COO, sorry, please stand. Great, thank you very much. And now, Anthony, I call on you. We have known each other enough years, and we've moved from being across the table at NEDLAC to being comrades, I believe, as well as colleagues. So Anthony is now Chief Director of Social Security and Social Insurance, and I welcome you to give the keynote address. Thank you very much.
All right. Good morning, everyone. How are you at the back there? The back is always quiet. And also, good morning to our online colleagues. Program Director, thank you very much for this opportunity. Of course, I'm not the Minister or the Deputy Director General who is on the program. However, from the Department of Social Development, I take this opportunity to welcome the invitation that you have given to us to come and be part of this conversation. Of course, as you indicated, the 2023 Summer Social Security Symposium has a focus on 2 areas. That is, 1, the role of social security in the just transition, defining a new social compact, and the impact of climate change on communities and the informal sector. For us as a department, this is an important program that we see bringing together stakeholders to deliberate on important issues that affect individuals, households, communities, and us as a nation. Therefore, this is an opportunity for us to reflect on issues that are currently affecting us and that we look forward into the future. Social security remains a subject that will be with us in our lifetime. As we know, social security in South Africa, it is one of the largest interventions that we have as government in terms of addressing poverty, particularly those who have been marginalized as well as being vulnerable, particularly children, women, the elderly, and those persons with disabilities. As you would recall, recently, as a result of the COVID-19, government has extended coverage to those unemployed adults aged between 18 to 59, and through the social relief of distress grant that government has extended, as indicated in the medium-term budget policy statement, that it has been extended by another year. That goes to show that our response as government has to be looking at the needs of the vulnerable as things emerge. And similarly, this is relevant to the topic that is underpinned by the subject of climate change. South Africa's social security system continues to be recognized internationally. For example, this year, the department received an International Social Security Good Practice Award for Africa on the gradual extension of the child support grant. And that goes to show government commitment in improving the lives and livelihoods of those who are vulnerable. As a country, colleagues, we continue to be confronted by extreme levels of unemployment, poverty, inequality, as well as emerging disasters, floods, droughts, as well as some social ills like gender-based violence and femicide. Therefore, as we gather today, over the next 2 days, we must underline that as a country, we must address our societal challenges in the context of our deep-rooted social, economic, and political history as a country. We must understand the multidimensional impact of poverty, for example, and the need for multidimensional intervention to address these challenges. Therefore, Program Director, from the interventions that will come from the various speakers on the program, we do look forward to be enlightened on the various dimensions of the subject of this summer 2023 Social Security Symposium, entitled The Role of Social Security in South Africa's Just Transition. Our Constitution does guarantee the right of access to social security for all in South Africa. And that was as a part of a transitional post-apartheid redistributive justice commitment. Inadequate social protection or social security policy is an essential component of a just transition for South Africa and needs to be clearly articulated. I did see the copy of the report that will be presented later today. So that is we are looking forward to engaging on that piece of work. We need more research and deliberations as a society. We can never get enough of being said, now we know everything, because things are dynamic. The world is dynamic. Our societies, they do change from time to time. South Africa needs to transition into a low carbon economy by 2050, centered around just transition, meaning that no one should be left behind in the decoupling of the economy. As we have noted domestically and internationally, colleagues, extreme events, for example, that encompasses changing weather patterns and natural disasters, they mainly impact poor communities, and that tightens the poverty grip, especially on those who are already vulnerable. And in particular, that relates to women. It affects the job market, incomes, and other areas. The traditional arms in South Africa on social security, social insurance, and social assistance, they do provide some cover to individuals. And we know that our social assistance program, while it provides significant relief to those vulnerable groups, it is means-tested. Therefore, as a country, when we look at the gender dynamics, we are underlining this morning that, as a reminder, colleagues, that women remain the most vulnerable in South Africa, and Black women in particular. When we look at our social security, social assistance grants program for the children that receive the child support grant, 98% of the caregivers are women. And hence, as we discuss the role of social security in the just transition, it is important to underline that there is a gender dimension that we need to consider. And I believe that the interventions that will come from the various speakers will delve deeper into these issues. How do we get there? We talk about a social compact, and a true social compact in South Africa needs to begin and end with a concrete commitment to a decent life for all by ensuring universal social security that reaches the most vulnerable first. While there might be emphasis on the vulnerable first, I think you agree with us as a department that what COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated to us is that all of us are vulnerable when it comes to life cycle risks. We were all locked down. Those in the informal sector could not trade. For those of us in formal jobs, we could not go to work, and we need to work remotely. In other instances, shops closed, no transport. So, as a response to these emerging risks, we must therefore underline that our interventions need to put emphasis on the coverage of everyone. And of course, as per the Constitution, we need to ensure that support is given to those who are in need first, as an example. Program Director, I'm not going to stay long here, but let me conclude therefore by saying that as an inclusive and decent social security system, he has a special role to play in this transition, given that a large beneficiary of social income are women, and that women will be adversely impacted by the effects of climate change. I think the point has been made. And in addition, Program Director, we talk about decent. We also need to talk about the comprehensiveness nature of our social security interventions that we need in our country. We mustn't only put emphasis on single items, and that's why, as a government, we talk about the need for a comprehensive system of social security provision in the country. It is our hope that this symposium will open up key areas of research and amplify the discussion around the role of social security in the just transition discourse. As a department, as the program director has indicated, we will continue to participate in the work that the Social Policy Initiative is doing with other partners on the decent standard of living research work and this symposium. We are not visitors to these programs, because we do find the value and the worth of the input that comes through these programs. We therefore wish this forum fruitful discussions, and we look forward to reading the outcomes of the event that has been organized. And definitely our minister will get a report on the outcomes of this program. Thank you very much to SPI and all the colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. And thank you for that commitment to continuing our collaboration from our different perspectives. One of the challenges that we have in this country is we are the most unequal country in the world in terms of income as well as wealth. We know that inequality has spatial as well as racial and gender impact, and it really determines people's life paths, which is why social security is needed from the cradle to the grave as a life cycle response to the kinds of vulnerabilities. And that's what Anthony was talking about. from the 1952 ILO, the Minimum Standards of Social Security Convention, to the much more recent the Social Protection of Resolution 202. We've seen globally a change to how we see and anticipate the responses of the state to people's vulnerability. As I said at my opening, in South Africa, we still have a bifurcation of our social security. We still tend to see it in terms of poverty or charity relief, whereas in fact there should be a far greater dynamism. And as we will see through the different presentations today, we're looking at new frontiers of just transition with Norma's research, which is going to be launched, but we're still deeply invested in our history when we see that the type of social security that South Africa has was developed for white workers with the industrialization path of South Africa. There was never an attempt to provide income security for the majority of people who are unemployed who just happened to be Black. And that level of exclusion needs to be at the forefront of the questions that we ask in terms of forming our campaigning and our advocacy and our research as we go forward. And also how we engage with our politicians ahead of next year's election. We're now going to move straight into the screening of A Decent Path, which is a movie that was funded with support of the United Nations SDG Fund. When we started speaking with UNICEF about our vision for this movie, what we were saying is that, sorry, there seems to be a bit of, there we go. We were right in the heart of the introduction of the 350 grant. We knew that things were happening, changes were happening on the ground, but both because of the lockdowns, the various stages of lockdown, but also because of the distance, the social distance, for instance, between policymakers and people living in communities, between academics and beneficiaries. We wanted to have a documentary in which people could speak their own truths, and that could be archived, and that could be kept as an historic reference back when we look in years to come and say this was a threshold. Did we use this opportunity as much as we could? Did we enable that to be the transformative moment for South Africa's struggling existence? Or did we turn our back and say that was too difficult, that was too awkward, that was too disruptive from what we wanted to do? And that really brought about the movie, A Decent Path, which was shot by filmmaker Delisa Moabi over a period of about 14 months. It was quite challenging as people were moving around and as the COVID restrictions were kind of reintroduced and uplifted and reintroduced. It's a combination both of beneficiaries, realities, but also of the ideas of people. Both, so the minister will be present in the room because she is in the movie wearing her 350 Rand grant at the FES premises back last year when we were having the first discussion around it. I think because of the inequality in South Africa, it was also important for us to have a movie show the visceral impact and reality of poverty, particularly when you come to suburbs, when you come to cities, but also when we talk to international colleagues and the impression that they have of South Africa is the one that is catapulted from Sandton and Clifton rather than, for instance, Everton or Tabanchu. So I am now going to ask Moses to screen the movie. We hope that you enjoy it. 52 minutes is a little long, but it's also very, very packed with different aspects. And we move from looking at how people receive the grant. We look at questions of how they use the grant, which is something which has always raised a lot of controversy. We also look at how people used it as a springboard to economic multipliers and how they used that to start creating their own incomes and how that got taken away from them. And then it concludes with some policy questions as to where the grant should go going forward. So thank you, Moses. If you do want to slip in and out and get some coffee, do, or tea or any of the amazing out there. We do not have popcorn, but we do have a lot of enthusiasm here. So thank you very much.
ngizalwa kaJoni, ngihlala edolobheni, ngihlala no-anti nogogo ney'ngane zethu, kodwa ney'ngane zethu. High school yami ngidlule khona la eDennisville, Inweke Secondary School. Ngagcina ka-grade 10. Yebo, ngakhulela ngiku-grade 10.
Ka lebitso nna ke Lerato Ratiane, ke hlaha ka Valley, ke tswa Bophelong, ke holetse Bophelong ka 14. Ka tlung ke dula le ngwana heso, ke dula like bana ba heso, ke dula le ausi wa ka le abuti wa ka, then re dula le bana ba rona. Nna ha ke sebetse, ke dutse hae. Ya, ha ke sebetse, ke dutse hae, which is ke dependile ho yona 350 ya teng.
I'm originally from Galena Park, a place near Frye town. I stay with my grandmother, my uncle, my cousin. I was raised by a single parent who tried by all means to be there for us, even though she was unemployed. But she did the best for us. She made sure that I never felt the void of not even having a father in my life. She's like the best thing that has ever happened in my life. Okay, Letra is an ambitious person, hardworking. I just finished metric last year, 2021. I'm also doing my acting on the side. I attend classes at Joburg, and I enjoy it a lot. It gives me life, it gives me peace, it gives me like happiness.
Siyahlupha ngalesi state kakhulu ngenxa yokuthi akukho umsebenzi, akusinazimali.
350 ke apply-ile, then le teng ke apply-ile because of like ke le motho e le goreng ke ne ke e hloka, so ya ka apply-a ka kena ho like di-app-ong wa bona, but e le gore ke eng e sokodisitse, but ka qeteletse se ke qeteletse ke e thola.
Well, I had it from somebody who has, already applied. I asked him the question: Is it doable? Like, can I do it? Is it true that there is something like this? And he said, yes, you can do it. And then let me try this. Unfortunately, then I was 17. I couldn't do it. Okay, I said, okay, let me wait, finish my tree, and it happened that I was able to apply for it.
Ke la ka apply-ela itse ke utlwela ka because ne ke tshepa ke trusta ka gore e tlo nthusa haholo because ho na le moo tjhelete ya teng it's needed private ha e batle. Okay la ba.
We have a constitution that guarantees the rights for people that also includes people being able to take care of themselves. Now, if that's a constitutional imperative, it is therefore important for us to understand that those who do not have jobs, number one, those who live in very difficult circumstances, those who live in poverty, in hunger, and those who are facing unemployment, the only way as far as they can be supported is to make sure that we continue with the grants in general, because remember that the old age grant comes through because the government at the time, way back in 1994, took the grants which had been there, but only for white people in the main, and for a small number of black people.
It's very important, I think, to realize and understand and conceive social protection in a way that recognizes that a child lives in an environment he or she lives in a family. It's about making sure that there is a system around the child that's caring, that's supportive, as opposed to necessarily focusing on the sole circumstances of a child.
First time ntho ene ke ene kgona mposta aba ke dula le mama ga ona ntate hlokofetse ke na le batjhana ke na le ngwana ke la ke sa dule le yena gona tjena mara ke dula le batjhana ba expectile ke malome just ka natlo e sa tla toropong o tla le di-fruits o tla le wang understand Shabon, le maotwana ao paki wang understand something o kgona ho tla ba le bona ba kgona ho thaba malome a rona o teng.
At home, I come from a very, poor background. My mom, she's unemployed. My brothers, they are also trying by all means to find these jobs, try to help in the house. So I felt the need to apply for it to try and help where I can. I didn't want to bombard her or them with my problems, Yes.
The interesting thing about the 350 Rand that was introduced during COVID lockdown is really that for the first time, I think, South Africans became aware of the level of destitution that is there in the country. That destitution was indeed highlighted very strongly with the lockdown. People couldn't venture out to go and look for jobs. By the way, when we speak about those jobs, it was predominantly people who were doing what are called piece jobs here and there, temporary engagements here and there, the so-called men on the side of the road. And there were concerns that came from different quarters in South Africa. There are economists that wrote an open letter to the president indicating that under the circumstances of people having lost jobs and not earning an income, the situation in the country was going to be dire and actually it was going to be bad. Research went on to prove exactly that.
In some senses, the basic income grant for a working age adult discussion in this country was dead, effectively. Right? Then COVID arrives, and all of a sudden we understand that there's this huge shock into the labor market. And so the discussion was really not driven so much about the unemployed. It was driven about around the employed who might fall out of employment or lose earnings because of COVID.
The COVID kind of accelerated thinking along a whole sort of lot of fronts in South Africa, and it let something through that was essentially disallowed to even be thought about or proposed within government up until that point. And my understanding is that even the Department of Social Development wasn't proposing a national treasury, said, we want this and we want it now. So COVID provided a window, and for better or worse, that's meant that a conversation has begun at a different level than would ever have been permitted before, and that is a good thing.
I think COVID-19 pushed us to implementing things that we might have never thought we were going to do at this period of time. In fact, when we look at the 350 and the proposals for the basic income grant support, which has been in the pipeline but disappeared. I mean, the policy was developed as way back as 2002. And after that, it disappeared. It took the impact of COVID-19 and the questions being answered. You have now introduced 350. then what? What are you going to do?
The United Nations in South Africa is actually having this conversation as we speak. We need to view the current discourse and conversation that's going on in the country on the basic income grant. As you know, we are a collective of a number of entities representing the UN in South Africa. We need to make sure that we bring a common position. That's actually something that's been requested of us by the government of South Africa, and particularly the Department of Social Development, because it strengthens their case when we come as a united, coherent system to say this is what we feel is an important way of dealing with social protection in South Africa.
One of the most shocking things about our country is so soon, relatively speaking, after the adoption of the final constitution, we see a country that is completely marked by poverty. The most recent Stats SA poverty figures go back to 2014, 2015, the Income and Expenditure Survey. And according to those, 55.5% of South Africans lived below the upper bound poverty line. 25% of South Africans live below the food poverty line, which is 624 Rand per person per month.
Poverty, you know, when Stats SA measures income poverty in South Africa, it's over 50% of South Africans who fall below the poverty line, which is about 1,300 Rand per person per month in a household. And so 55% of South Africans fall below that amount of money to live every month.
During the COVID period, we had a specific poverty survey that was done to try and keep pace with what was doing. It was called the NIDS-CRAM survey, and what that found was that depression amongst women particularly, because they were having to look after households, shot up tremendously.
Like akekho umuntu osebenzayo, siphila ngegrant, asisa-afford njengekuqala.
If we are considering a household, let's say, you know, women-headed household with a number of children, the caregiver, whoever is in the most immediate environment of the child, is the one who would be supported in a way that covers the full spectrum of needs of people in that household.
Re le batho ba batsho ne re dependile tšheleteng ya bana grant. Ne ona le banana ba ile go ke ba ja tšhelete ya bana grant. Motho a ikapese ka tšhelete ya ngwana grant a sa sheba ngwana. So since when o kene 350 wa kgona gore le ena a ka ikapese. Before 350 ke no sena ntho na motho a ikapese like wa bona. Ona apara ka tšhelete ya ngwana a le ba le gore a etseng tlamile ngwana a tloja, tlamile ngwana e reaching, tlamile ngwana a apare.
I was happy to apply for that grant, to know about grant, grant. Until they were disappointed, like next I expected that kind of an answer. At the end of the day, I was happy that it is going to be grant. I'm going to get a boost of life. Thanks God. But it went anti-clockwise, like.
Poverty and lack of hope means that people just don't see a way forward. So, Hein, I do want us to move on to the basic income grant. And for listeners who haven't yet read the book, would you take us through why you decided to write on a basic income grant?
First thing to say is I don't like calling it a grant, which has overtones of charity, of a power imbalance as well. It's a basic income, whether universal or not. I think it's a very important shift I'd like us to start thinking about, that we don't talk about it as a grant. which leads on to ideas of handouts and dependency and so on.
We don't have an extensive food security system. So income support, the SRD had to do that too. It was a key part of its immediate thing under COVID.
There is a clear movement in many of the countries that I've worked in or for, to making sure that the United Nations support the establishment where it doesn't exist, or the strengthening of a social protection system that also is a recognition of the importance of a country, a community, a society itself contributing to the well-being of its people.
We all know which building blocks have to be in place to build a successful and prosperous society. We all know that. It's not as if South Africa is to invent those things. The world over, you have prosperous countries and countries that look after and care for their citizens. It's not as if South Africa is being expected to do something that's never been done here.
It's almost decent of people to say, oh, well, I don't think, maybe we shouldn't be asking for this because we should be working or something. The reality is that many people won't be able to participate effectively in society without some basic support.
You need money to do anything. You need money to look for a job. You need money to pay for the bus, the taxi. Every aspect of this requires money. You don't have money because you're unemployed.
I want to go to town. Just think about 30 ranta but 30 ranta eo re ke hate dropo o ke la bon ke khone hore le nna ke itwanela ke o apare my boxing glove.
Social grants lead to positive outcomes.
It improves their ability to look for work because they do have some income.
I have, my acting, to go to Joburg, it's money. I have to cater for that also, try to help myself with my necessities, those important things, Even when applying for varsity, I had to pay for registration.
I-youth earning ayiqedanga isikole angisho iyakwazi ukusiza sikhona ukuthola imisebenzi kalula uma ungayanga esikolweni uma ungana-certificate awukhona ukuthola umsebenzi so i-350 iyasiza because siyakhona ukuvala lana lapho sikhona khona ukuvala khona.
We did research as a department, but also other institutions did research on where is the 350 going, on what are the people spending this money. And the research that came back, it just came back simple and straightforward. The majority of our people are spending that money on their basics.
350 ke tšhelete nngwe e le goreng ke ya nthusa ska ka tlong ke kgona gore ke reke phofo ke reke fish oil ke kgona gore ke reke bo di-vege wa bone seneng like ha re ntho tsa ngwana di a shorta bo diaparo ke kgona gore ke petšhe mo le mong.
People spend it the way they want to spend it. But there are those people who know that they have families to look after, who know that they at least, even right now if you are receiving it and you're as young as I am, just think at home. They think at home, they think about their family, they think about the important things that affect your life.
Yeah, yona ke bona benefit ya 350 more like around unyaka because of ba teng batho ba ile goreng keng o mongwe tlo o jwetsa o mbotse like maybe I say again o mbotse ya ka sa lo topa wa bona dishabonyana sa lo topa e nyana wa bona.
The grant helped me because I could help myself from the beginning of the year till now. I could buy myself those necessities. I could cater for myself for transport from here to Joburg to do what I love, all those important things, Yes.
Ke dula le mosadi mo lo fela e kgona ho balansa It might never knowing. Today I can be like this. Tomorrow, Sunday, shop or ukilabon. Like it has a role in my life.
The empirical evidence for what small amounts of money enable people to do is absolutely indisputable. It does not get spent on tobacco, drugs, and cigarettes. There is absolutely no evidence for this, and anybody who claims otherwise should show me the evidence.
Income support of this nature has a very positive impact on people's participation in society. It does allow some people who are running small businesses to start something up, and there is evidence that that happened almost immediately with the COVID SRD grant.
I always tell people that if COVID and the grants never happened, we wouldn't have an ice cream store, honestly, so it's the driver, you see, yeah, 100%. When the first 350 hit, I was just assisting in Guinea, and then I felt like it's not going anywhere and it's not sustainable. I understand at 350, you need to choose which uthenga in. Is it food? Is it toiletries? You see. So after saving 2 months' money of the grant, I went to the stores to purchase products that I loved, and it wasn't a thing of I want to open up a store. It was an experiment. First batch, we were able to land a similar batch. So we were able to grow slowly and then gradually and all of those things.
Hona le batho ba e lo reng keng e ba tswela molemo ba o ke tsebang ba butse business ka yona, which is business a teng e ne se business e kgolo, but o qadile a bula business e nyenyana a rekisa di-ice le di-ice cream.
Bese ngithola ngingathula umsebenzi so yangigosa ukuthi ngijike at that point ukuthi ngizame ukuthi enye alternative of source of income okuyishishinini le sazama lokuqala la wasazama njalo nanjalo, so manje ever since lokhu soba sabantu abazama ukudeka siphila ngakho day.
Nna ke la ka zama ke bule business ka yona mara ya ntswela molemo, which is business ya teng gore ke stopile like ho sona le dipulanyana because of di-ice ne sa tsamaye, ice cream ne sa tsamaye, le hape ne re hlotjwa ke electric ne dula e tsamaya, then ka tla tloela ho di rekisa. So le nna somehow ke nana starting from this month ke tlo qala ke save ne ke nana gore ke etse business nyana ka yona.
We talk about social security as being transformative, enabling people to move into a better circumstance or just to keep there, to keep ticking by. And we've seen this with the 350 grant. As soon as you use that to start making money to start your small business, you get the certain grant taken away from you. So your innovation gets punished.
Ave qala ngo-2020 le 350 ngayithola kahle ngo-August. This year yastopha ngithi ngo-April. Azange ngasuke ngiyitholile, ngiqala ukuyithola last of last month. Mangiqala futhi ngiyithola. Abe ngilokhu ngi-check abele ukuthi ngine-source of income.
Since I've ever received June, July, the rest always today. I tried, and they also gave me a toll-free number. It's a free number. Like I tried. When I called them, they said to me, they see I got an income coming in me. I said, no, stop it. I don't have an income coming. Income now and then. Come on.
Well, I guess the most important thing is to assist our people in the appreciation of setting systems that are effective enough to be able to reach out to them. That's our task. That's our job.
Ngwana yeso ntse re pending since I thola hi1 since e la kwala batho re tla thola ka April since I thola hi1 yena so im affectile haholo because ke motho a sa sebetseng motho a ditseng hae and ke motho wa ntate o na le mosadi o na le bana.
I have to, cancel it about around December because I've applied for NSFAS and NSFAS and 350, I have to cancel it, in order for my NSFAS application to be approved, for next year for varsity. Well, I want to do Bachelor of Film, Television, that.
To make sure that it is the right person who receives it, the right person who meets the criteria for the 350, but also it's got to be somebody that we can also do a check out as to whether they're not receiving any other social grants. So part of what delays in instances is when that data about people has to be checked against other data in government. I know that's easy for me to say, but for somebody who has absolutely nothing, can't put bread on the table, for them, I'm just telling them a long, long excuse.
But Baba sebetsang teng, they never happen. Something doesn't exist, but it's like it's something e tlo etsahalang ke la bo le wena o be ne le sure kgwedinyana ke tsa tjena when it comes to that mind hard knock life how totally next.
Firstly, when it was initiated, it was supposed to be for 6 months. After that, there's been piecemeal extensions by 3 months, by 2 months, by a month. It's just been haphazard. It does not demonstrate a clear, directed focus on policy issues. So what we have had is an instance where we have the 350 grant. It was introduced, it was paid, it was terminated, it was stopped. It was then reintroduced, piecemeal fashion, and we need not forget that when the Minister of Finance extended it to the year 2024, our president had extended it to the year 2023. So we've got extensions that come at different times, for different time period, and from different powers within government. That doesn't, to me, demonstrate a government that is convinced or a government that has got a very clear, very focused, very directed policy position.
The social grant as it stands is not sufficient to address all the issues of dignity, not sufficient to address all the issues of poverty. It's a starting point to give people control over their lives.
And so that number is offensive in a sense, ex ante. You think about it, 350 Rand a month. It's offensive.
Yes, I'm not to sound a bit, ungrateful, man. But 350, I can't even buy a grocery that will last for the whole month.
The 350 Rand grant, when you look at it, it cannot even buy a single loaf of bread per day for a month. It cannot.
It's oil, 10 kg of rice, 10 kg of phoofo, flour. If it's more 350, I don't know, maybe I can tell a boshawonyana, I can go, or
in instances where you have families pool the grant, so they bring all the 350 together, and indeed, in those kind of circumstances, it does make a difference.
Ke abuti wa ka wa ithola, ke usi wa ka wa ithola. Yeah, which is re na lo re kopanye tšhelete teng re kgone go rekeng something ya o ja ka tlung.
If they had to increase the grant, I would be happy if they would add another 700 on top of it.
What's a maybe like a 600 or 650. Yeah, it's something.
Ngokuthi nje i-amount le yakhona nento esidingakalayo empilweni lana ufumana ukuthi isasencinci isa-challenge nakhona impilo ukuthi ngathi ingayengezeka ibe nini. So lama isaselapho tata ukuthi iwish ukuthi ngabe bekhona ukuyengezeka besingakhona ukukhuluma okunye, kodwa eqinisweni yona yavala lapho ukuvule khona tata omncinci lowo.
Yona for the sake baka-increase, ne? I don't fight, I don't want them to increase it. It's the way bona baka kgonang to the limit e bona baka kgonang. I mean, like, letsonyana le ba fileng nna ke a le leboha. I don't eseng kalo kaofela mo bona ba kgonang ho feta teng. It's fine. Oh, it's not that kamne jole ba ihang ga ba ho batle wang understand. Mo ba kgonang ho feta teng, it's fine that amount of money. You can make a living. Then utana ekeletse ka nako e when it comes like
So what we do need to appreciate and understand, and this is very important and key, the 350 Rand grant that was introduced in May of 2020 is no longer 350 Rand today because of the rise in living cost and also inflation eroding the value of that grant.
What Treasury has been, and the Minister of Finance have been attempting to do for ever since, has been to try and get it off the books.
Historically, there's been very, very strong resistance from particularly the National Treasury when it comes to providing income support to unemployed South Africans.
From the Treasury side and from the, from the private sector side, many arguing, okay, we can't afford this. 350 times by the number of potential recipients lands up at a number around 50 billion Rand. Okay, and so initially in the budget of 2021, government said, okay, we're stopping this SRD thing. It was a temporary COVID measure. And then when the uprisings happened in the middle of last year, then it came back again. And then it was put back in the budget. It was put back in, but temporarily for 2022-23, and the medium-term budget statement recently said that's going to be the same situation again. So it didn't come out of a well-thought-through strategy to provide for the working age population in South Africa as the gap in our system. It was emergency relief, but nonetheless, it showed that you can actually do this stuff at very short notice if you have the will.
The other myth associated with that argument, or problem with that argument, is that we actually give very substantial subsidies to high-income people. Very substantial subsidies. These probably amount to 180 billion Rand a year. And they go to the people who are taxpayers. It's a tax subsidy. So you only benefit because you're a high taxpayer. So if you're a low-income person, a tax subsidy makes no difference to you. So the tax subsidies are enormous in the retirement system. But the very, very interesting feature of that is that nobody has ever analyzed it. When that ideological issue is raised, it's raised in relation to low-income people. When it's a transfer to them, it's a big story. We must basically defend every single part of the proposal. But when it's a subsidy going into the retirement industry and to financial services sector, no analysis. Nobody has to defend it. It's not controversial. Not a single part of the business press will actually evaluate that or go into it's just assumed it's the right thing to do. But it is a handout.
South Africa is the most unequal country in the world. And it is both in terms of income that is earned or not earned, but also in wealth. So people who have access to assets have access to far more assets than their sort of collegiate people in other countries would have.
I don't know how somebody can say we can't afford this, in some fiscal sense. Okay, 50 billion is a large amount of money, but given the use to which the economically active South Africans put this money, I just don't understand.
The lesson for me is that the statement that a UBI is unaffordable, I think, is an undefensible statement, or an indefensible statement. There are so many variables that first have to be confronted before one can make that statement. It is what do you regard as being important enough to find money for? And that's a political decision. That's why the framing of the demand is so important, and it's why it's so important that it's not just a decision taken by technocrats.
When you talk about financial viability and affordability, right? If you want to look at affordability, you also have to look at it from a political perspective.
So I think the political variant, the political conditions for UBI are fundamentally important. When we come to what's affordable in terms of counting the pennies and the pounds, these are debates which we have to have in a rigorous and open-minded way. Something that emerges from mobilization, popular organizations, civil society, pushing and demanding it because they will have to defend it.
You know, politics really moves things forward when very often in many countries it's multi-parties that agree to the same thing, not just one. It's society that agrees to it, and if you as a political party don't agree to do this, then you're not going to be in government for very much longer.
Our system of government at the moment has failed. It has failed by not providing them with jobs, working with industry to provide jobs for those people.
When I first started looking at the basic income grant, it was really as a right. I thought it was a human right, as a constitutional right that should be met because it's in the Constitution and because people need to have the certainty. Then I started looking at the statistics in with sort of greater focus, and particularly the unemployment figures. I think if you look today in 2022, our second quarter unemployment figures reflected that 12.4 million adults are unemployed, and a further 12.5 million adults are not related to the labor market in any way. They're neither employed nor in training or unemployed. They just are. And then the number of employed people, including the informal sector, is about 14 million. So we have about 24 million adults who are not in a job.
The existing economy with its existing structure and our existing labor force the way it is, it's going to take a long time to absorb, and unemployment rates have been going up rather than down.
The assumption that we're going to employ all those people that are unemployed at this point in time, somehow miraculously, in the next few years, it's not going to happen.
Many of the people are going to have to create their own livelihoods. There's no other way. But how are we supporting them to do that? Because often this discussion of we're never going to create the number of jobs means who's going to create the number of jobs? It's very unclear.
Government and industry failed to create jobs. That's the first thing. They failed to create jobs. And at the same time, there is some reluctance to introduce the basic income grant. My own argument is that you cannot deny people both jobs and a basic income grant. You have to provide one of those two. Preferably, it has to be jobs.
Work and what it offers to us is and has changed fundamentally. We live in South Africa in a society which cannot provide decent remotely decently paid work to more than 40% of the population.
It's only if you don't embed yourself in the realities of South Africa that you can come with things like, okay, but anybody who wants to work can get a job.
The opposition tends to come from people who have an ideological view that providing income without somebody having worked for it is somehow problematic.
We get told that people should be able to work and get a job, even though we know in our heart of hearts, we know people who are unemployed. We know a lot of people who are unemployed, and we know that they're not lazy people.
There are no people that want to live off social grants. South Africa is a wealthy country. People look around, they see beautiful houses, they see beautiful residential areas. They all want to go up in life and live well. And they know very well that a grant is not the way out.
We need to start at a basic level, but it's almost as if we need to invert the entire economy, because the economy is meant to be providing for people. But as it stands, it's as if ordinary people are subject to the whims of the economy and are completely rejected and marginalized if the economy doesn't need them.
The argument that has come from government has been that we have programs, public employment creation programs, such as EPWP, Expanded Public Works Programs, and other similar types of state-created employment opportunities. So that mainly has been put forward as being the solution, but it's not workable. It does not resolve the unemployment problem and unemployment challenge.
The reality is you can't solve South Africa's employment problems with employment programs, special employment programs.
Our SMME policy and our medium enterprise policy, our small and medium enterprise policy, and our super small and medium enterprise policies have all failed badly. Now you're saying we must ramp that up instead of just putting money in the hands of people.
The basic income grant comes in to address policy failure in labor market policy and the failure of South Africa's economy to create jobs.
We have specific grants for things like protecting children and ensuring that they have income. And we have grants for people who are disabled and people who are old age who aren't expected to work. The issue is that we don't protect many people who have to survive in their day-to-day existence. And the assumption has been, oh, well, they should just be working. But you put people in such difficulties that they can't access society in any viable way, then you exclude them. And in fact, you will have a society, a divided society as a consequence. Social cohesion breaks down.
What we need to ask ourselves as a country is this: those that are without income, what must they eat? Where must they get the bread that they need? Where must they get the potatoes? Where must they get the milli meal? How are they supposed to get that?
Think like that and think of your 350 grant as an investment in them.
So in a country like South Africa, to say that there should be no income support for adults because adults should get a job, it doesn't make sense. There's no logic in that. So people would rather stop and say we have high unemployment than to ask the next question, which is a difficult question, as in, what should we do next? What solution is there?
It's not as if there aren't workable solutions. What is lacking is the will to resolve these problems.
For the grant to work effectively, even if at its own level, you want it properly designed so that when people do get a job, they get off the grant. If it's not a big right now, where a big is support to everybody in the country, if it's a grant to help the economically active who need to in the engagement with the labor market, well, then you need it properly designed to do that. And the mechanisms to increase the grant need to be properly thought through.
our system at this point in time, the system of social grants, should in total have as its objective the elimination of poverty at the upper bound poverty level. So it's not saying it at the decent standard of living level, saying it at the upper bound poverty level. Now that's because that's a fairly steep target to achieve and will have to be achieved over time. When we're in a position where we're having to struggle to defend merely an allocation of 350 Rand per person, but the upper bound poverty level is what we would regard as basically the lowest level of reasonable income support that's required for people in need.
For quite a number of us, we do think what goes on at the moment is deliberate. It's not by mistake. Government spends billions and billions of rands on procurement. So there can be ways that can be found to bring more people into the economy.
You can also restructure parts of government expenditure. There's massive, massive inefficiencies in government, and it's a question of priorities.
Our push is to push back those that are pushing back the opportunity and possibility of a social security that is sustainable, social security that empowers our people, social security that lifts people out of hunger. And therefore the 350, we are pushing for its extension, and I'm very happy that the first one we didn't make it, but the second one, the third one, we made it, and I believe we made it because we were able to convince other government departments such as Treasury, for instance, that is responsible for the purse, and we understood where Treasury came from when they say, no, there isn't money, but we asked the question back, can we afford to have so many people in South Africa hungry? Can we afford to have so many people in South Africa unemployed?
There are a couple of ways at looking at why leadership should consider adopting a basic income grant. Or extending the social relief of distress grant until we have a basic income grant. The first is from a human rights perspective. It exists in our constitution, the universal right to social security. It is a universal human right in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It sits in the SADC People's Social Treaty. So that's from a human rights perspective. If leadership says, well, we don't really, human rights are not really the thing that are getting us going, it makes economic sense. We cannot save our economy unless we have greater distribution of income. In terms of basic monetary policy, if people are not able to buy, there's no demand. And if there's no demand, there's no production. So there's no employment. And it's a really vicious cycle. And that's why we've seen our economy shrinking, our unemployment growing as jobs shrink, because there just is no demand. If you go into any spaza shop in township area, the choice is really small because people just don't have disposable income. People don't have the ability to create their own jobs because there's nobody who can support them. So that's from the economic situation, but also from the political and question of stability. People need to take cognizance of the fact that if you have the majority of people with nothing to lose, then they are incredibly volatile and any spark can ignite them.
We need a country, we need a nation to provide for its people with the resources, no matter how modest and limited that they are. That social protection system needs to be there. It's a way for people to have dignity, but it's also a way, in my view, in my sense, for a country to be dignified and proud.
There'll be a time when we have we have households where nobody is employed and nobody in living memory was employed. So the crisis is, what are we doing to create a society that's ready for that? And that's why the basic income grant, to my mind, enables us to distribute income in a completely guaranteed fashion. It doesn't depend on whether you've got a job or not.
As a country, we have committed to, we've signed and ratified many international instruments on human rights. The Universal Declaration on Human Rights is one of them, and many others where as a country we commit ourselves that we will indeed respect human rights. Our constitution also has a Bill of Rights that is an extension of that respect of human rights. So the basic income grant then addresses quite a number of political obligations that we have as a society, of social solidarity, of human rights issues, and many other aspects really that as a society and as a country under our government, we should be making sure that South Africans are assisted through basic income support.
We should always be protecting people of working age. And you can create different regimes around protecting, around how you support people back into the workplace. Job reskilling programs, job placement programs that are tied to the social security system. This is what you also find in the very developed social protection systems in Europe, elsewhere. They don't only give you income support, they also give you the support to re-access the labor market.
Without some sort of social vision and leadership, you know, people sit wherever they are in their positions in society and just sort of posture about how life really works in this country. And it needs leadership to say, no, but this is how life really works. We actually do know how life works in this country. We can spell it out for South Africans and say, this is our vision, you know? And then whatever, then the sky's the limit.
This is a rich society-wide debate that has to be engaged in. And we know that it is happening because if you look at the kind of survey results from 5 years ago against 2 years ago about the percentage of South Africans who support the idea of a UBI, it is of a different order. We now have at least half of South Africans when polled are willing to support a UBI. That was not the case in 2017, 2018. So we're on the road, I think, to this, but it's going to be a process, which I'm pretty sure we will end up with something that we can feel proud of in the next decade. I'm quite sure of that.
Good morning, everyone, to our online participants and everyone in the room. My name is Norma, the Senior Researcher at the Social Policy Initiative, and I have the pleasure of facilitating the first session of the symposium. But I've seen this movie, I think, ample times, and there's always something new that comes out. And I think I would invite us to stretch a little bit if you want to get coffee, if you want to go to the bathroom, just for 5 minutes, and I'll invite the participants online to just start writing in the chat box while people are stretching quickly. Any thoughts, any feedback, any comments on the movie. And I just wanted to say that today, while we're going to have presentations and movies, but it is really a marketplace of ideas. Everyone is a thought leader in their right, so please feel free to engage the space. Even the presentations that are going to be made today, they are meant to spark the ideas and the thoughts, engage them, and challenge even some of the speakers as well. So I will give us 5 minutes for stretching, and then we will head over to just the thoughts on the movies, ideas, and then to session 1.